Portions of the following program may have been pre-recorded.
Your local music played coast to coast. The only nationally local radio station. You're listening to WSRR Radio.
After Hours.
The following conversations are that of conspiracy and should be viewed as such. Viewer discretion is advised.
For the intended and optimal listening purpose, we strongly encourage you to tune into WSRR Radio Monday nights after midnight to hear and contribute to the live broadcast. The following is not intended for the light of day. Tonight's story doesn't begin with a monster or a ghost or an alien. It begins with a scientific experiment. According to a leaked Foundation file, a team of scientists was conducting research into the manipulation of fabric and space itself. The project had been in the making for years, and the day of the test, everything appeared to be proceeding exactly as planned. The machine powered up. Instruments showed normal readings, and the scientists watched as the experiment reached full power. Then, in an instant, something went catastrophically wrong. There was a violent flash of light. Alarms began blaring throughout the facility, and when the emergency shutdown was complete, one of the lead researchers had simply vanished. No body, no blood, no sign of an explosion, and no indication that he had somehow escaped. It was almost as though he had been erased entirely from reality. The investigation may have ended there if not for one detail. The scientist had been wearing an experimental environmental suit equipped with a data recorder and voice logger. Somehow, against all odds, those recordings continued following his disappearance. When Foundation personnel finally received the data, they discovered something deeply unsettling. The scientist wasn't dead. He was just somewhere else. His first recordings were calm and methodical. He believed he'd been thrown into another room or trapped somewhere inside the facility. He called out for help, expecting someone to answer, but no reply ever came. When he activated the lights on the suit, he found himself surrounded by an endless expanse of darkness, illuminated only by a faint crimson glow. There were no walls, no floor beneath his feet, no ceiling overhead, no stars, no horizon, nothing that resembled the universe at all. It was seemingly a infinite void stretching out in every direction. The recordings continued. The tone began to change. Hours became days, days became weeks, and somehow he remained alive. By this point, the scientists had realized his oxygen should have been exhausted. Any food in his system should have run out of his body. His body should have failed. Instead, time itself seemed to lose all meaning. He drifted endlessly through the red emptiness with nothing to anchor him. No sunrise or sunset to mark the passing of time. He relied entirely on his suit's internal clock. He even began to question whether it was functioning correctly. But he spoke constantly into the recorder, partly to document his surroundings, and partly because hearing his own voice reminded him that he still existed. Eventually, loneliness became his greatest enemy. He began forgetting small details about his life. The faces of friends and family began harder to picture. He struggled to remember the sounds of laughter, the smell of rain, and what it felt like to stand on solid ground. Some of these data entries consisted of nothing more than him talking to imaginary companions just to convince himself that he hadn't completely lost his mind. Other recordings captured long stretches of silence before he quietly admitted that he was terrified. Not of dying, but of being forgotten. He began to realize that if no one could reach him, then eventually, no one would even remember that he had existed. As more time passed, his body began changing in ways that defy medical explanation. The environment that surrounded him wasn't simply empty. It appeared fundamentally incompatible with human existence. His skin deteriorated, his muscles weakened, and he described sensations that no physician should adequately explain. Yet through it all, he remained conscious. His journal entries became shorter and more difficult to understand. The scientist who had once calmly documented an experience was replaced by a man desperately clinging to the last fragments of his identity. In one of his final coherent recordings, he wondered aloud whether he'd somehow fallen into space between realities, maybe a place that existed outside of the universe itself. Then, after what he believed to be years trapped in this void, the impossible happened. The experiment that had sent him there had briefly reestablished a connection. For a few fleeting moments, a doorway opened between his prison and into our reality. Scientific rescue teams managed to pull him back, but the man that they recovered was barely recognizable. Whatever existed in the endless red expanse had changed him physically and mentally. He survived only a short time after returning before succumbing to his injuries in conditions that still don't have a full explanation. The official incident was written off as a catastrophic laboratory accident. No other public record of this experiment exists, and no one outside of this organization was ever supposed to know what happened. But according to this file, the recordings remain locked away in a secure archive documenting the account of a man who may have spent years trapped in a place where reality itself had ceased to exist. Whether the story is entirely true or merely an elaboration on a man's ramblings as he was being recorded through some psychological experimentation, it's impossible to know at this point. But if this is in fact true, then somewhere beyond the edge of our universe may lie an endless sea of crimson darkness, just waiting silently for the next person to fall through the cracks of reality. Unfortunately, we are out of time on After Midnight. So next week, 12:03 a.m. Monday night, technically Tuesday morning, we will reconvene and continue for After Midnight live on WSRR Radio. Until then, use that text line at 216-859-8699. Follow along on WSRRradio.com. Join the Discord server and the Conspiracy section to continue the conversation there. If you miss any episode of After Midnight, you can catch the re-airings all throughout the week at the same time, 12:03 a.m. or Visit the website under After Midnight to get the full backlog of shows. I have been radio's Rebel DJ Style. Until next time, wishing you goodbye and good night.
Preceding program was a WSRR radio production.